The penal transport vessel Orcus Raptor cut through hyperspace with mechanical indifference, its cargo hold packed with humanity's unwanted. Asset 442, formerly Cale Voren, pressed his forehead against the icy viewport, watching distant stars blur into streaks of faded light. The vessel's destination loomed 12 hours away, World Aegis Prime, a war-scarred planet transformed into a labor extraction facility where unproductive assets were sent to be broken or discarded. Cale's reflection stared back at him from the viewport. Gaunt face, hollow eyes, the scar across his right cheek, a reminder of his capture. Once a resistance fighter leading guerrilla missions against corporate occupation, now just another number in a transport hold. His muscles remained intact, but something inside had fractured during interrogation. Now he awaited his first labor assignment with dull resignation. The ship's intercom crackled. "Attention all assets. Prepare for final approach sequence to Aegis Prime. Resistance will result in immediate neurological correction." The transport bay doors slid open, revealing Commander Ilsa Zyron. Her cold eyes surveyed the prisoners with clinical detachment as she strode down the central aisle. The sharp angles of her uniform matched the rigid set of her jaw. "Assets will be processed according to ability and assigned appropriate labor extraction protocols," she announced, voice carrying through the hold without emotion. "Maximum productivity is required. Suboptimal performance will result in recycling." Her gaze settled on Cale briefly before shifting to a hunched figure 3 rows behind him. "Asset 774, forward." A slender alien rose, silvery fur dulled under the harsh lights. An Arcran female, feline-like in appearance but with unmistakably humanoid features. She moved with evident pain, each step carefully measured. As she passed Cale, he noticed the surgical scars along her throat, evidence of vocal cord modification or damage. Her amber eyes met his for a fleeting moment. Commander Zyron smiled thinly. "This is what happens when aliens meddle in human affairs. The Arcrans thought themselves our equals in the war. Now they serve as our subjects." The Arcran kept her gaze forward, dignified despite her evident weakness. "Asset 774 will be designated as your break partner." "Asset 442, Zyron continued, addressing Cale directly. "She is the weakest specimen we have. Extract productivity by any means necessary or face joint termination. Her failure is your failure." Cale nodded mechanically, but his mind raced with fragmented memories. The Arcrans had fought alongside humans in the Resistance, their unique resonance abilities proving invaluable against corporate security systems. Now, they were being thrown aside like outdated equipment. As Zyron turned away, the Arcran, Asset 774, caught his gaze again. Despite her obvious physical frailty, a subtle smile played at the corners of her mouth. "You'll last even less than he did," she whispered, her voice a barely audible rasp that seemed to bypass the air entirely and resonate directly in his mind. Cale blinked in surprise, but before he could respond, guards ushered them toward the exit ramp. The Orcus Raptor had arrived at Camp Theta 5. The sprawling labor facility rose like a metallic tumor from Aegis Prime's polluted landscape. Towering spires of corroded metal, smokestacks belching toxins into an already poisoned sky. Distant slag fields stretched to the horizon, punctuated by excavation craters and processing facilities. The air tasted of metal and ash. As they were herded toward the processing center, Cale found himself walking beside Asset 774. Up close, he could see that beneath her silver fur, her frame was alarmingly thin. "What's your name?" he whispered when the guards weren't looking. Her amber eyes studied him for a long moment. "Syrah," she finally rasped, the sound barely audible. "Syrah Thane." "Why did they—" Cale began, but a guard shoved him forward. "No communication during processing. Asset 442. The initial week of break assignments thrust Cale and Syrah into Aegis Prime's most hazardous sectors. Assigned to the outer slag fields, They were tasked with salvaging viable components from partially buried machinery, work that required both strength and speed. Sura moved with painful slowness, her limbs trembling with exertion as she attempted to help Kale lift twisted metal panels. Overseers circled like vultures, their shock batons crackling with energy. Asset 774 showing minimal productivity. 1 reported into his comm unit. Asset 442 prolonging inefficiency by accommodating weakness. Kale gritted his teeth. Every minute Sira spent struggling with a component was another minute closer to both of them being deemed unproductive assets. He knew what happened to those who failed to meet quotas. "Move faster," he hissed, yanking a corroded power coupling from her hands. "They'll recycle both of us at this rate." Sura said nothing, but her eyes remained fixed on him with that same knowing expression. On the third day, they were sent into a partially collapsed dig silo to retrieve valuable resonance crystals. The narrow tunnel descended 30 meters into unstable ground, the walls groaning under structural stress. Kale crawled ahead, flashlight between his teeth, while Sura followed at her maddeningly slow pace. "There," he muttered, spotting the crystalline formation embedded in the tunnel wall. "Hold the light while I extract it." As he worked the crystal free with a prying tool, he became aware of a strange tension in the air. Sura had gone completely still beside him, her ears flattened against her skull. "What?" he demanded. Instead of answering, she placed her palm flat against the tunnel floor, then grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. She pointed urgently toward a different passage than the one they'd entered through. "We need to go back the way we—" Kale began, but Sura's grip tightened painfully. A low rumble interrupted him, followed by a shower of dust from the ceiling. The tunnel vibrated as hairline fractures appeared in the supporting beams. "Quake," Kale realized, panic rising. He scrambled toward the exit tunnel, but Sura pulled him forcefully toward the alternate passage she'd indicated. For a moment, he considered abandoning her. Her weakness had become a liability that might cost him his life. A violent tremor decided for him. The main exit tunnel collapsed in a deafening cascade of metal and rock. Kale froze in horror, but Sura was already pulling him down the secondary passage. Her movements, normally so labored, had taken on a fluid urgency. They crawled through the narrow space as the rumbling intensified. Just as they reached a junction, a massive support beam crashed down behind them, obliterating the path they'd just traversed. Sura guided them through 3 more turns before they finally emerged into a maintenance shaft that led to the surface. As they stumbled into the hazy daylight, Kale stared at her in confusion. "How did you know which way to go?" Sura touched her ear, then placed her palm against the ground again. "I feel it," she whispered hoarsely. "Vibrations. Before they become quakes." Kale's eyes narrowed. "You sensed the tremors before they hit?" She nodded once, then returned to her facade of weakness as an overseer approached, demanding to know if they'd retrieved the crystals. Kale produced the resonance crystal he'd managed to keep clutched in his fist throughout their escape. The overseer grunted in acknowledgement before ordering them back to work. That night, in the dim barracks, Kale watched Esra from his bunk. The other prisoners gave them a wide berth. No one wanted to associate with the break partners, especially when one was an alien. The lighting flickered constantly, power fluctuations a normal feature of Camp Theta 5's aging infrastructure. When most others had fallen into exhausted sleep, Sira slipped from her bunk and made her way to the small generator room that adjoined their barrack section. Curious, Kale followed her. He found her seated cross-legged beside the humming generator, a small metal object cradled in her trembling hands. As he watched from the doorway, she carefully disassembled what appeared to be a damaged language module, a translation device with audio playback capabilities. Her fingers, which had seemed so weak during their labor assignments, now moved with precise dexterity as she reconnected wires and adjusted internal components. When she activated the repaired device, it emitted a haunting melody, a lullaby in what Kale presumed was an ancient Arcran dialect. The song contained phrases he couldn't understand, but the emotional resonance transcended language. As the melody continued, he noticed something extraordinary. The worn metal panels around them began to vibrate subtly, humming in harmony with the music. Syrah noticed him then, her eyes widening in alarm before she quickly deactivated the device. "What was that?" Kale asked, stepping fully into the room. "The metal, it was resonating with your song." Syrah studied him for a long moment before whispering, "Arcran resonance tie. We connect to machinery, feel it, speak to it. That's why they took your voice," Kale realized. "Your people can manipulate technology through sound." She nodded, one hand rising to touch the scars on her throat. "I was constructed sentinel, bred to interface with resonance networks. Command, sabotaged. 2 cycles ago." Her broken speech came in painful bursts, each word clearly costing her effort. Kale knelt beside her. "So all this time, you've been pretending to be weaker than you are." A ghost of that knowing smile appeared. "Not pretending. Severed from command. Voice damaged, but not useless." Over the following days, Kale began covertly sharing his rations with Syrah. Though still cautious, he found himself asking her questions during their assignments, learning fragments of Arcran culture through her labored whispers. She explained how her people had developed resonance technology, using harmonic frequencies to communicate with and manipulate machinery at a molecular level. The practice had evolved from ancient singing traditions, where Arcran nomads would tune their environments for optimal living conditions. "Like singing to plants to help them grow," Kale suggested. "Yes," she rasped. "But with metal, with circuits, with energy, we hear what others cannot." Meanwhile, hushed conversations among other prisoners revealed disturbing rumors. An older prisoner named Corin Kale, once a skilled engineer before being designated an unproductive asset, confided to Kale during a water break that Commander Zyron had larger plans for the Break Partners program. "She's not just testing labor efficiency," Kale muttered, his eyes darting nervously. "Word is, she's preparing to auction proven broken assets to research facilities, bioweapons research." "Using prisoners as test subjects?" Kale asked, disgusted but not surprised. Kale nodded grimly. "Especially aliens. There's talk that Arcran resonance could be weaponized, become the deadliest bioweapon in the sector, if properly harnessed." Kale glanced across the yard where Syrah was sorting through salvage components. He recalled the way the metal had hummed in response to her lullaby. If that small demonstration was possible with her damaged vocal cords, what might she have been capable of at full capacity? 2 weeks into their assignment, a major operation was organized in Sector R3, a vast salvage field where valuable ore deposits had been discovered beneath layers of industrial waste. Dozens of prisoners were deployed to excavate the area, digging trenches and operating antiquated drilling equipment. Kale and Esra were assigned to a peripheral sector, cataloging recovered components. The work was monotonous, but less physically demanding than their previous tasks. Kale had just finished marking a crate of salvaged circuitry when a distant boom shook the ground. Black smoke billowed from the main excavation site. "Residual ore destabilization," a guard shouted, activating his comm unit. "Sector R3 main shaft collapsed. Multiple assets trapped." Chaos erupted as guards scrambled to assess the damage. Kale stood frozen, watching as emergency response teams rushed toward the collapse. Then he felt Syrah's hand on his arm. "I can help," she whispered. "I can find them." Kale stared at her. "You'll expose yourself." Her amber eyes locked with his. "People will die." Before he could respond, she was moving toward the disaster site with surprising speed. Kale cursed under his breath and followed her. By the time they reached the collapsed shaft, guards were frantically trying to clear debris from the entrance. At least 15 laborers were trapped inside, according to shouted reports. Asset 774, return to your assigned sector immediately, an overseer barked when he spotted Sura. Ignoring him, she pressed her palms against the ground near the collapse. Her eyes closed in concentration. After a moment, she looked at Kale and gestured for him to follow her to a section of the debris field, about 20 meters from where the guards were digging. "Here," she whispered. "Air pocket. 5 people." Kale hesitated only briefly before calling to the nearest guard. "There are survivors here! We need to dig here!" The guard looked skeptical, but, faced with the urgency of the situation, directed several workers to begin clearing the area Sara had indicated. Within minutes, they had created an opening large enough to extract the 5 trapped laborers, all alive though injured. Emboldened by this success, Sira moved methodically around the perimeter of the collapse, identifying 2 more locations where survivors might be found. Her acute ground resonance perception guided rescue efforts with unerring precision, identifying air pockets and structural weaknesses that would have been impossible to detect otherwise. When they reached a particularly unstable section, she crouched low, pressing her ear directly against a twisted metal beam. 2 more, she rasped. 1 injured, leg pinned. Kale relayed this information to the emergency team, who quickly tunneled through the debris. They discovered Korankal, the engineer who had warned Kale about Zyron's plans, along with a young laborer named Valen Riss, whose leg was indeed trapped beneath a fallen support. As rescuers worked to free Valen, Kal caught Kale's eye. "She knew exactly where we were," he said quietly. "How?" "She can sense vibrations through the ground," Kale replied, keeping his voice low. "Resonance perception?" Kal's eyes widened with understanding. "An Arcran ability. I've heard rumors, but—" He glanced at Sira with newfound respect. "She just saved our lives, risking exposure of her abilities." By the time the rescue operation concluded, all 15 trapped laborers had been recovered alive, a miracle by Camp Theta 5 standards. Word of Sura's inexplicable ability to locate survivors spread quickly through the prisoner population, though most attributed it to luck or coincidence rather than special abilities. Not everyone was fooled. That evening, as Kale and Sira returned to their barracks, a security detail intercepted them. "Asset 442, report to Commander Zyron's office immediately," the lead guard ordered. "Alone." Commander Zyron's office occupied the highest level of Camp Theta 5's command tower. Floor-to-ceiling viewports offered a panoramic vista of the sprawling labor facility and the toxic landscape beyond. Zyron stood with her back to the door when Kale was escorted in, her attention apparently fixed on the slag fields below. "Asset 442, she acknowledged without turning. "I've been reviewing the incident reports from today's collapse in Sector R3. Kale remained silent, standing at attention as he'd been trained to do. 15 assets recovered alive, Zyron continued, finally turning to face him. An extraordinary outcome, considering the severity of the structural failure. Her eyes narrowed. Particularly interesting was the role your break partner played in the rescue operation. Asset 774 assisted as directed, Kale replied neutrally. Did she? Zyron approached her desk and activated a holographic display. Security footage showed Sira moving around the collapse site, touching the ground, whispering to Kale. It appears she directed rescue efforts with unusual precision, almost as if she could somehow sense where survivors were located. Kale maintained his blank expression. She has good instincts for structural integrity, useful in salvage operations. Instincts? Zyron's mouth twisted into a cold smile. Let's dispense with the pretense. Asset 442. I know what your partner is, what she can do. She switched off the display and leaned forward. The Arcran resonance ability is precisely why she was assigned to you. Confusion flickered across Kale's face before he could suppress it. You thought it was random. Zyron laughed softly. Nothing in Camp Theta 5 is random. You were chosen specifically because of your history with the Resistance, where you fought alongside Arcrans. I wanted to see how you would react to being forced to break one of your former allies. She circled the desk until she stood directly in front of Kale. But that's not all. Asset 774, Esira Thane, is special even among her kind. Before her capture, she was part of an elite resonance corps. Her abilities were exceptional. Then why pretend she's the weakest asset? Kale asked, unable to hide his curiosity. Because I needed to assess whether her abilities remained intact, despite the vocal cord modifications. Zyron's expression hardened. And now I know they are, which makes her extremely valuable and extremely dangerous. She returned to her desk and retrieved an official-looking document. I'm prepared to offer you clemency. Asset 442. Complete reinsertion into human society with a clean dossier. All you need to do is confirm that Asset 774 is unstable and dangerous. That during today's rescue, she demonstrated abilities that pose a threat to facility security. Kale stared at the document. Freedom in exchange for betrayal. A month ago, he might have accepted without hesitation. And if I refuse? He asked quietly. Zyron's expression darkened. Then I'll be forced to conclude that you've been compromised by alien influence. You'll be scheduled for immediate recycling, along with your partner. She pushed the document toward him. You have until tomorrow morning to make your decision. Consider carefully where your loyalties lie. Asset 442. With your own species, or with a broken alien whose people are already doomed to extinction. When Kale returned to the barracks, he found Sura waiting anxiously. Though she said nothing, her questioning gaze demanded answers. Zyron knows, he said simply, keeping his voice low. She wants me to turn you in as dangerous and unstable. Says you're not what you appear to be. Sura's eyes widened with alarm. What did you tell her? Nothing yet. I have until morning. Kale sat heavily on his bunk. She offered me freedom in exchange for your life. A tense silence stretched between them. Finally, Sura whispered, would it help to know she's right? I am dangerous. Kale looked up sharply. What do you mean? Sura glanced around to ensure no one was listening, then leaned closer. My resonance could collapse the mag cores in Aegis Prime's power grid, destabilize the entire facility. Her voice, though barely audible, carried an undercurrent of power. That's why they damaged my vocal cords, not to silence me completely, but to control the frequency and amplitude of my resonance. You could bring down Camp Theta 5? Kale asked incredulously. She nodded once. With access to the right conduits, yes. Kale's mind raced with implications. If what she said was true, Sura represented not just a personal opportunity for freedom, but a chance to strike a significant blow against the corporate military system that had enslaved them all. But before he could respond, the barracks door slammed open. Commander Zyron stood in the entrance, flanked by a squad of heavily armed enforcers. Asset 442, you've made your choice. I see, she said coldly. Asset 774 on your feet. You've been redesignated for immediate special processing. Kale stood instinctively. I haven't given you my answer yet. Your return to this barracks rather than accepting my offer was answer enough. Zyron signaled to her enforcers. Secure both assets for transfer to the Resonance Control Center. As guards moved to restrain them, Kale caught Sura's eye. A silent understanding passed between them. If they were being taken to the Resonance Control Center, presumably the facility's power hub, it might be their only chance. Now! Kale shouted, lunging at the nearest guard and wresting his shock baton free. In the same motion, he drove his elbow into a second guard's throat. Chaos erupted in the barracks as other prisoners scrambled for cover. Sira moved with startling speed, ducking beneath a guard's grasp and sliding between two others. Kale tossed her the captured shock baton as he grappled with another enforcer. "Stop them!" Zyron shouted as Kale and Esra broke free and sprinted for the exit. "Security lockdown! All sectors!" Alarms blared throughout the facility as they raced down corridors. Kale, following Sira's lead. She navigated the complex with surprising confidence, choosing paths that avoided the heaviest concentrations of security personnel. "You know where the Resonance Control Center is?" Kale gasped as they ducked into a maintenance tunnel. "I can feel it," she replied, her raspy voice stronger than he'd ever heard it. "The strongest resonance flows in the facility. This way." They emerged into a lower level of the facility that Kale had never seen before, a cavernous space filled with humming machinery and pulsing energy conduits. At its center stood a massive cylindrical structure that Sra identified as the resonance hub. "An abandoned reactor," she explained as they crept closer. "Repurposed for resonance experiments." Before they could reach it, the heavy blast doors at the far end of the chamber hissed open. Commander Zyron stepped through, accompanied by a full squad of enforcers with weapons drawn. "I must admit, I'm impressed by your resilience. Asset 774, Zyron called across the chamber. "Most of your kind were broken much more easily." "My name is Sira Thane," the Archon replied, her whisper somehow carrying across the vast space. "I am not an asset." Zyron smiled coldly. "You're whatever I designate you to be, and right now, I designate you as a threat to be eliminated." She turned to her enforcers. "Take aim. Fire on my command." "Wait!" Kale stepped forward, placing himself between Sira and the weapons. "You said she's valuable. You want to study her abilities. I've seen enough to understand the threat she poses." Zyron's expression hardened. "The risk outweighs the potential benefits. Stand aside. Asset 442, or die with her." Instead of retreating, Kale moved closer to Sira. "Do what you need to do," he murmured. "I'll buy you time." Sira nodded once, then turned and sprinted toward the resonance hub. "Fire!" Zyron commanded. Energy bolts cut through the air as Kale dove for cover behind a console. Sira zigzagged between machinery, narrowly avoiding the barrage as she closed the distance to the hub's control panel. Kale emerged from cover long enough to hurl a loose component at the nearest enforcer, striking him in the head. He seized the momentary confusion to charge the group, tackling another guard and using him as a shield against the next volley of shots. Meanwhile, Sira had reached the resonance hub. She placed her palms against its control interface, closing her eyes in concentration. The ancient machinery hummed to life, dormant systems reactivating under her touch. As Kale fought to keep the enforcers at bay, he heard it, a haunting melody rising above the chaos. Sira was singing, her damaged voice finding strength through connection with the resonance conduits. The lullaby he'd heard in the generator room now filled the vast chamber, amplified and transformed by the hub's crystal amplifiers. Metal support beams began to vibrate in sympathy with her song. The control panels flickered as power fluctuations rippled through the facility. Dust shook free from the ceiling as the entire chamber resonated with harmonic vibrations. Zyron's eyes widened with realization. "Stop her now!" she screamed. The enforcers turned their weapons toward Sira, but the intensifying resonance was affecting their equipment. Energy weapons sputtered and misfired as their internal components vibrated out of alignment. Kale seized the opportunity to disable two more guards in the confusion. A stray energy bolt struck his shoulder, searing through flesh, but he barely felt the pain as he fought to reach Esra's side. The resonance built to a crescendo, Sira's song weaving complex patterns that seemed to bend the very air. Security cameras shattered, their lenses vibrating apart at the molecular level. Enforcers clutched their heads as the harmonic frequencies interfered with their neural implants. "Commander Zyron, immune to the worst effects due to her modified command implants, drew her personal energy baton, and charged toward the resonance hub. "I'll kill you myself! Alien filth!" Kale intercepted her, blocking the baton's swing with his forearm. The energy discharge sent him staggering backward, muscles spasming from the shock. But he'd bought crucial seconds. Sira's song reached its climax, a sustained note that caused the entire chamber to shudder. The resonance grid's harmonic collapse triggered a localized quake that sent Zyron crashing beneath a toppled control console. She lay trapped, critically wounded, but conscious. Her cold eyes, now filled with fury and fear. "Kill her!" Zyron gasped, blood trickling from her lips as she struggled to free herself. "Finish it!" Kale looked to Sira, who had stopped singing and now stood swaying beside the hub, exhausted by the effort. The decision lay before them: kill Zyron to ensure their escape, or leave her to face the consequences of her own hubris. "No," Sira whispered, her voice barely audible again after the strain. "Not like them." Kale nodded in agreement. He knelt beside the trapped commander, long enough to disable her baton, then rejoined Sira. "Let's go." They left Zyron trapped in the collapsing hub, her threats and curses fading behind them as they navigated through the facility's now chaotic corridors. The resonance hub's collapse had triggered facility-wide systems failures. Power fluctuations caused security gates to lock down, forcing all prisoners to evacuate into central gathering areas. Alarms blared discordantly through malfunctioning speakers. In the central plaza, Kale spotted Corin Cal organizing a group of disoriented prisoners. The engineer's eyes lit up with recognition. "You two! What happened?" Cal demanded as they approached. "Camp security systems are compromised," Kale explained quickly. "This is our chance." Understanding dawned on Cal's weathered face. "A breakout." "For everyone," Sira added. Word spread rapidly through the assembled prisoners. Years of suppressed hope ignited into action as Cal, and others with technical knowledge, began to formulate an escape plan. Valen Riss, the young laborer they had rescued from the collapse, limped forward with improvised communication devices he had secretly assembled from salvaged components. "We can coordinate through these," he explained, distributing the devices to key individuals. "Short range only, but enough to organize groups." Sara placed her hand on one of the devices, closing her eyes briefly. When she opened them, she nodded to Kale. "I can enhance the signal. Guide us through the chaos." They divided into teams, with Sura using her resonance tie to machinery to deactivate power grid remnants, open emergency doors, and mask their movements from remaining security drones. Kale led the physical efforts, organizing defense teams to handle any resistance they encountered. As they navigated through maintenance tunnels toward the facility's perimeter, reports filtered in through Valen's communication network. Facility management was in disarray, signaling for outside support. Bulk transport ships were arriving, but only to retrieve high-value assets and equipment. The lower-tier prisoners were being abandoned to the collapsing infrastructure. "We need transport," Cal muttered as they paused in a junction. "Even if we breach the perimeter, the slag fields stretch for kilometers. We'd never make it on foot." Kale turned to Sra. "Can you sense any viable vehicles nearby?" She pressed her palm against a coolant pipe, concentrating. "Maintenance level 3, shuttle bay, 4 operational craft." They altered course, descending through emergency access shafts until they reached the indicated level. As Sura had predicted, a small hangar contained several maintenance shuttles, short-range vessels designed for facility repairs and perimeter patrols. "Can anyone fly these things?" Kale asked, as they examined the shuttles. Cal stepped forward. "I was a fleet engineer before." He gestured vaguely at his prisoner uniform. "I can handle basic navigation." They worked quickly to prepare the vessels, distributing the escaping prisoners among the 4 shuttles. Sira helped Cal bypass the security lockouts, her resonance abilities proving crucial in reactivating the dormant systems. As the final preparations were made, Kale pulled Sarah aside. "You should go with Call's group. They have more technical expertise to help you fully repair your vocal module." She studied him intently. "You're not coming. Someone needs to ensure all shuttles get clear of the facility perimeter." He nodded toward the control station. "I'll coordinate from here, then follow in the last vessel." Sira shook her head firmly. "I stay with you." Before Kale could argue, alarms indicated that security forces had detected their presence in the hangar. "No time to debate," he conceded. "Let's get everyone moving." The first 3 shuttles launched successfully, disappearing into the hazy atmosphere as they headed for the canyons that offered the best cover from pursuit. Kale and Sura boarded the final vessel, along with Valen and a handful of others, who had insisted on remaining with them. As Kale initiated the launch sequence, facility defenses came online. Automated turrets tracked their vessel, energy beams slicing through the air around them as they cleared the hangar doors. "Hold on!" Kale shouted, pushing the shuttle's engines beyond safe parameters. The vessel shuddered as it accelerated away from the facility, weaving erratically to avoid the increasingly accurate defensive fire. Sira placed her hands on the shuttle's control panel, closing her eyes in concentration. Her faint hums seemed to harmonize with the vessel's struggling systems, easing the vibrations that threatened to tear the hull apart. "There," she whispered, pointing toward a narrow canyon cutting through the slag fields. "Follow that path." Trusting her guidance, Kale steered the shuttle into the canyon. The jagged walls rose on either side, offering protection from the facility's long-range weapons. Through this treacherous corridor they flew, Sira's whispered directions, guiding them past unstable formations and hidden hazards that the shuttle's damaged sensors couldn't detect. By the time they emerged from the canyon's far side, they had put sufficient distance between themselves and Camp Theta 5 to risk activating the emergency beacon that would guide them to the rendezvous point Kal had established. The coordinates led them to Zarya's Haven, a lush, forested moon orbiting a gas giant at the edge of the system. Hidden beneath the dense canopy, a small settlement had been established by former prisoners and resistance fighters who had managed to escape the corporate military regime's reach. As their shuttle descended through the atmosphere, Kale marveled at the stark contrast to Aegis Prime, where that world had been defined by pollution and industrial decay. Zarya's Haven pulsed with vibrant life, emerald forests, crystal-clear streams, and air untainted by toxins. They were greeted by Kal and the others who had arrived before them, along with the settlement's existing inhabitants. Introductions were made, wounds were treated, and for the first time in years, Kale felt something approaching hope. In the days that followed, the new arrivals were integrated into the settlement's routines. Kal's knowledge of engineering proved invaluable, and he quickly became a respected voice in the community's council. Valen, despite his injured leg, showed remarkable aptitude for communications technology, enhancing the settlement's early warning systems. Sira found her place among a small group of alien refugees who had also escaped corporate exploitation. With Kyle's assistance, she began the delicate process of repairing her damaged vocal module. The work was painstaking, requiring both technical expertise and an understanding of Arcran physiology, but progress was steady. A week after their arrival, Kale found Sura seated beside a forest spring, tools and components arranged neatly around her as she made final adjustments to the vocal module. "How's it coming?" he asked, settling beside her on the mossy bank. She looked up with a faint smile. "Almost complete. Kal is brilliant engineer." Kale nodded. "Everyone's talking about what happened at Camp Theta 5. The facility's entire power grid collapsed after we left. Commander Zyron is presumed dead." "Not dead," Sira whispered with certainty. "Wounded, angry. We'll return. Then we'll be ready." Kale picked up a small component, turning it over in his hands. "News of our escape is spreading through underground networks. Other labor camps are reporting increased resistance activities. What you did, what we did, it's inspiring others. Sura carefully inserted the final component into her vocal module, then attached it to the scarred tissue of her throat. She closed her eyes, concentrating as the device synchronized with her nervous system. When she opened her eyes again, there was a new light in them. "Can you hear me now?" she asked, her voice still soft but clear, without the painful rasp that had defined her speech since Cale had known her. "Perfectly," he replied, unable to hide his amazement. She stood, moving to the edge of the spring. "Then listen carefully to what I have to say." Raising her voice, she began to sing the lullaby that had first revealed her abilities to Cale in the generator room of Camp Theta 5. But now, unhindered by damaged vocal cords, the song soared with a beauty and power that sent shivers down his spine. The water in the spring rippled in perfect concentric circles from where her reflection appeared. The leaves on nearby trees trembled not from wind, but from resonance with her voice. Even the air itself seemed to shimmer with visible harmonics. Other settlement residents emerged from their dwellings, drawn by the extraordinary sound. They gathered at a respectful distance, watching in wonder as Sura's song transformed the clearing into a living instrument that played in perfect harmony with her voice. As the final notes faded, she turned to address the assembled refugees. "For too long, they labeled us as weak, as broken, as disposable assets to be used and discarded." Her newly restored voice carried effortlessly to every ear. "But today, we stand as proof that what they perceive as weakness can become their undoing." She gestured to the diverse group, humans and aliens alike, who had escaped Camp Theta 5. "Each of you possesses strength they could not see or chose to ignore. Together, we are not just survivors. We are the beginning of something they will learn to fear." Cale stepped forward, reaching into his pocket to withdraw a small medallion, Commander Zyron's insignia of authority, which he had retrieved from the resonance hub during their escape. He held it up for all to see. "This represented their power over us," he declared. "A system that reduces life to productivity metrics and discards anyone deemed unworthy." He turned and tossed the medallion into the spring, watching as it sank beneath the crystalline surface, growing smaller and less significant until it vanished completely. Sura placed her hand on his shoulder. "We build something new now," she said, her gaze sweeping across the gathered refugees. "Not based on breaking others, but on lifting each other up, on recognizing that true strength lies in compassion, in solidarity, in refusing to become what they would make of us." As twilight descended upon Zaria's haven, the refugees dispersed to their evening tasks with renewed purpose. Cale and Sura remained by the spring, watching as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. "Do you think we really changed anything?" Cale asked quietly. "One camp out of hundreds, thousands of prisoners still suffering. Every revolution begins with a single act of defiance." Esra replied, "What matters is that we showed it can be done, that their system has weaknesses, that when we stand together, human and alien alike, we can accomplish what none could do alone." She turned to face him fully, her amber eyes reflecting the first emerging stars. "And most importantly, we demonstrated that their greatest mistake was in how they judged strength and weakness." A distant flash in the upper atmosphere caught their attention. A ship breaking orbit, likely one of several that had departed in recent days to spread word of their successful escape to other resistance cells. "What will you do now?" Cale asked. "Your voice is restored. You could go anywhere, start a new life." Sura considered this for a moment before answering. "My place is here, helping others regain what was taken from them, not just their freedom, but their sense of worth, their identity." She smiled faintly. "And teaching a new generation that resonance can heal as effectively as it can destroy." "I'd like to help with that," Cale said. "I know. Syrah's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. We have much work ahead. Many more to save. As darkness settled fully over the forest, bringing with it a profound quiet broken only by gentle night sounds, Syrah whispered one final phrase, not in standard, but in her native Arkran tongue. The words were unfamiliar to Kale, but their meaning resonated within him nonetheless. No one breaks us again. The vow hung in the air between them, a promise and a challenge to all who would seek to reduce sentient beings to mere assets. From the depths of Camp Theta 5's oppression had emerged not just two survivors, but the seeds of resistance that would spread across the stars, beginning with those deemed too weak to matter, yet proving strong enough to change everything. On Zaria's haven, beneath the canopy of ancient trees and endless stars, a new chapter began, not just for Kale and Syrah, but for all those who had been labeled as broken, yet found within themselves the strength to forge a different path. Their escape was just the beginning. Their true journey, reclaiming dignity and purpose for themselves and others like them, had only just begun.